Hello. Have you ever yearned to own a handy pocket guide to the prostitutes of London? No, I thought not. However, if you're a gentleman of London in the late 18th century, then this was your essential guide to the sex trade around Covent Garden's lively theatre district. I'm talking today about Harris's List of Covent Garden Ladies. Now, guides to the London bawdy districts were nothing new. Ever since the Restoration, there had been pamphlets and guides to the racier and seedier end of London's streets. There had been 5 editions of Wandering Whore, published between 1660 and 1661, and the rather impressively titled A Catalogue of Jilts, Cracks and Prostitutes, Night Walkers, Whores, She-Friends, Kind Women and Other of the Linen Lifting Tribe. Yeah, that was published in 1691. But these were very short-term, one-off things. In 1754, Harris's List would change all that. It not only brought the trade more mainstream, but it sought to make it a versatile and complete almanac of the sex trade. It ramped up the language with its sumptuous descriptions, and it was updated every year. Yes, like the Guinness Book of Records, it came out every Christmas with the latest updates. Unlike the Guinness Book of Records, however, it wasn't cheap. It cost 2 shillings and sixpence, which put it well out of the reach of the lower and working classes. The average lower class wage in the 1750s was about 6 shillings per week, so you're talking a good 2.5 full days of work, just under half the working week, just to afford the book. When compared against wages today, this equates to about £145 for a 100-page book of prostitutes. So this was definitely catering for the man with money, time and wandering lust. Now, Covent Garden wasn't the only red light district of London at the time, but with its proximity to the theatre district, it was the main one. It is said that 2/3 of all London's brothels were to be found in Covent Garden, Drury Lane and the Strand. And regular viewers may recall we've encountered the boarding houses of Drury Lane before. They led to the downfall of Jack Sheppard. Now in these houses you'd find a melting pot of alcohol, revelry, actresses, artists, courtesans, criminals and aristocrats, and it's in one of these houses, the notorious Shakespeare's Head Tavern, that one Jack Harris, the head waiter and self-declared pimp general of all England, was operating. Now, one of the things that made him and the tavern popular was the list of 400 of the most well-known prostitutes in London that he kept behind a desk in the bar, and this is the original Harris's List of London. What turned it into the published work that has become widely known was the involvement of regular taverner and poet Samuel Derrick. He was a professional writer, and he needed to turn his talents into money, particularly quickly, to escape yet another stretch in Fleet Debtors' Prison. And so, this truly bizarre, Lonely Planet guide to the Covent Garden underworld was born. The published original condensed down to around 150 ladies, but instead of just names and where to find them, it extended to descriptions, background, health, which is an important but overlooked consideration in many of these guides, the general price region and their particular specialities. Then Derrick added in his literary flair with the most eloquent descriptions and a commitment, it seems, to never let a good innuendo go unused. Let's see an example, shall we? Let's take Miss Kent of number 9 Warren Street, Tottenham Court Road, who appears in the 1793 edition of the guide. Here the epicures in youth and beauty may satisfy their most ardent longings. Here Venus seems to have shed her choicest influence, and Cupid has called forth his choicest arrow of the amorous kind to warm her little breast to soft enjoyment. Artsy, isn't it? Had Private Eye been going in 1793, then I'm fairly certain that Sude's Corner would have been full of this. And the book is filled with this sort of flowery prose, but they're not all this complimentary. This is very much an honest review book, after all. A description of a Miss Berry in the 1773 edition describes her in the words as almost rotten and her breath cadaverous. Now this does make me wonder how she got in the list, but I suppose that might be what some people are looking for. Who knows? And if you are looking for something on the more, shall we say, unusual area of the market, well, Harris's List can help you there as well. Let's take Nancy Burroughs of Drury Lane from the 1761 edition. She is described as very impudent and very ugly, chiefly a dealer with old fellows. It is reported she uses more birch rods in a week than a Westminster school in a 12-month. In a word, this lady will condescend to oblige her companion in whatsoever way he likes, if she is but sure of being well paid for it. Quite. And very much in the interest of customer satisfaction, the book contains some warnings of which the discerning gentleman would be well advised to heed. Miss Young of 6 Cumberland Court in 1779. We mentioned her in the last list as tolerably handsome, but of a disposition mercenary almost beyond example. Her beauty is now vanished, but her avarice remains, and what is worse, she has very lately had the folly and wickedness to leave a certain hospital, before the cure of a certain distemper which she had was completed. In short, beware this woman, for she carries the pox. Now, it's tempting to consider these ladies as the down and out and desperate, but evidence for the oft-promoted image of the innocent young girl being tricked into it by a devious board, as shown in Hogarth's Harlot's Progress, is rare. The reality is, the women entered the sex trade for a variety of reasons, and the reasons back then could be very different from the reasons today. Georgian attitudes to sex, women, and the sex trade are complex, to say the least. And it's important not to judge this against modern standards, and frankly important not to judge sex workers at all, really. Some of those ladies needed help, yes, and some of them most definitely did not. But in its bizarre way, the list did help. For the ladies who made it into the list, it brought them to the attention of the gentleman who could afford the book, the higher paying type. It also allowed the woman a lot more freedom to choose her clientele, and a good number of these ladies became well-kept mistresses or even wives of wealthy men and aristocrats. There was many of the lady of the night for whom her appearance in the list dramatically improved her life. The 1764 edition entry for Miss Wilmot has a passage in there that describes her encounter with Frederick, the Duke of York, the King's brother. Other wealthy gentlemen who have been mentioned in the list include the King of Hanover, George IV, and our first Prime Minister, Robert Walpole. This is not the common street set that this is attracting. Now, by 1791, Harris's List was selling 8,000 copies per year. It was an absolute bestseller and a must-have in Regency society. But it was its very success that was to prove its downfall. By the end of the 18th century, public opinion was starting to turn against the sex trade as being something immoral, which slowly feeds in to that Victorian idea that we know and love today. Now, some years earlier, George III had issued a royal proclamation against loose and licentious prints, books and publications, dispersing poison to the minds of the young and unwary, and to punish the publishers and vendors thereof. And this was sufficient to bring the publisher up on charges. John Roach, who had taken over publication after the deaths of both Harris and Derrick, was sentenced to 1 year in Newgate Prison, as well as 3 years good behaviour on pain of a further £150 fine. And after that trial, the list was no longer published. Only 9 editions still remain in existence today. Now, what makes Harris's List fascinating is not only a well-written dose of smut, which we will all enjoy, but it offers an insight into the seedy underworld of Georgian Britain, which doesn't always rise into the public domain with such prominence. Anyone that wants to read more about the history of Harris's List should get the excellent book by Hallie Rubenhold, who has done most of the research into the creation and publication of the list and the histories of its authors and subjects. Also, if you're wanting to really get to understand Georgian attitudes to sex, then look no further than Kate Lister's A Curious History of Sex and Fern Riddell's Sex Lessons from History, and we will put links to those in the comments as well as the description below, along with the online editions of the original Harris's List test that you can still read for yourselves. Check them out. And while we're talking about buying books, you may recall at the start we asked, Have you ever yearned to own a handy pocket guide to the prostitutes of London? Well, you can. The abridged version of the 1793 edition has been reproduced by Ali Rubenhold and is available on Amazon, because you just never know when you might need it. Do enjoy yourselves, won't you? Bye-bye.